Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
Blood doesn't always make family, and family doesn't always share blood. I learned this the hard way on what should have been the happiest day of my life. My name is Jenna Dawson. Well, it's Jenna Smith Dawson now, though I barely got to enjoy my new name before everything fell apart. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I understood my place in this world. I was the responsible daughter, the one who moved out at 18, got her degree, built a career in marketing, and found a man worth marrying. I was the one who called our parents every Sunday, who remembered birthdays, who tried to keep our family together despite everything. My husband Jake is everything I never knew I needed. He's steady where I'm anxious, calm where I'm reactive, and patient in ways that still amaze me. We met 3 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. Such a cliche, I know, when he accidentally grabbed my latte instead of his black coffee. He took one sip, made a face that could have curdled milk, and spent the next 10 minutes apologizing while buying me a replacement and insisting I keep his coffee too, just in case. That's Jake, generous to a fault, always trying to make things right. Jake's family welcomed me with open arms from day one. His parents, Robert and Helen, treated me like the daughter they never had. But it was his younger brother, Torrance, who became my unexpected ally. Torrance is 31, 4 years younger than Jake, and as different from his older brother as night from day. Where Jake is all warm smiles and easy laughter, Torrance is sharp edges and careful words. He's a lawyer who could cut glass with his wit, but underneath that professional exterior is someone fiercely loyal to the people he loves. "Your family's interesting," Torrance had said after meeting my parents and Simon for the first time last Christmas. The way he said interesting made it sound like a diagnosis. My family is what you might politely call complicated. My parents, Damien and Claudia Smith, had Simon when they were young and struggling. He was supposed to be the practice child, the one they figured things out with. But when Simon proved to be more than they could handle as inexperienced parents, they waited 3 years before having me, hoping they'd be better prepared the second time around. Simon is now 33, though he acts like he's still 15. He's been a full-time streamer since he was 22, building a following through increasingly outrageous pranks and stunts. His username is @SimonSaysStream, and his bio reads, "Living life unfiltered 100%. No limits, no rules, just vibes," which tells you everything you need to know about his worldview. What started as harmless college pranks evolved into something darker over the years. Simon has been sued multiple times for trespassing during a haunted hotel investigation, for property damage during extreme shopping cart derby, and for harassment after he opened a wedding by pretending to object during the ceremony. Each lawsuit disappeared quietly, thanks to our father's checkbook and a series of increasingly expensive lawyers. Despite earning 6 figures annually from his streams, sponsorships, and merchandise, Simon still lives in our childhood bedroom. Not because he can't afford his own place, but because he can't be bothered to learn basic life skills. Mom still does his laundry, packs his meals, and cleans up after his messes. When I once suggested he might benefit from learning to cook, Dad actually laughed and said, "Why would he need to when his mother makes the best meals in town?" Simon's dating life is a revolving door of women who initially find his spontaneous lifestyle exciting, only to discover that spontaneity without responsibility is just chaos. The breakups always follow the same pattern. She'll want something real, he'll say she doesn't get his vibe, and our parents will nod along sympathetically as he explains how she was too clingy or didn't understand his career. Last year, Simon crashed his brand new BMW into a telephone pole after a night of celebrating hitting 500K followers. He was drunk, naturally, and the crash was bad enough that he spent 2 days in the hospital and 3 months in county jail. The fine was astronomical, the legal fees even worse, but Dad paid it all without complaint. Simon's response? He filmed a jail experience story time that got 2 million views and blamed the whole thing on the city for putting that pole in a stupid place. The warning signs were always there, flashing like neon lights in a dark room. But our parents were too blinded by their golden child to see them. and I was too tired of being the family mediator to keep pointing them out. As my wedding approached, I found myself caught between two worlds: the loving, supportive environment of Jake's family and the chaotic, Simon-centric universe of my own. I should have known that bringing these two worlds together would create a collision I wasn't prepared for. I just never imagined that collision would nearly kill me. 3 weeks before my wedding, I invited my family over for dinner. Not to my parents' house, where Simon's presence filled every room like smoke, but to the apartment Jake and I shared. I wanted neutral ground for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. I spent hours preparing Simon's favorite meal: lasagna with extra cheese, garlic bread, and the chocolate chip cookies he'd devoured as a kid. Looking back, I realize I was trying to bribe him, which should have told me everything about the state of our relationship. They arrived at 6 sharp, which surprised me until I realized Mom had probably been texting Simon reminders all afternoon. Dad carried a bottle of wine and his usual easy smile, while Mom bustled in with a container of extra sauce, just in case. Simon trailed behind them, already filming. "What's up, streamers?" he announced to his phone, panning the camera across our living room. "Simon's here at my little sister's place for some family dinner action. She's getting married in a few weeks. Can you believe my baby sister is old enough to get married?" Jake emerged from the kitchen, where he'd been opening wine, and I watched his expression shift from welcoming to wary as he spotted Simon's phone. "Hey, everyone," Jake said carefully. "Dinner's almost ready." "Jake," Simon bounded over, still filming, and threw his free arm around my fiancé's shoulders. "Guys, this is my future brother-in-law. Say hi, Jake." "Could you maybe put the phone away for dinner?" Jake asked politely, but I could hear the strain in his voice. Simon laughed. "Come on, man, this is my job. My followers love family content. It shows I'm not just about the crazy stunts. I'm a family guy, too." "Simon," I said, stepping closer, "we talked about this. Tonight's supposed to be about family time, not content." "It can be both," he grinned at me, then at his phone. "Look how protective she is. Feisty sister energy, right, fam?" I watched the comments scroll past on his screen. "She seems nice. Family dinner looks bomb. Simon's sister is pretty." And then, inevitably, "Do a prank! Prank dinner!" Throughout dinner, Simon kept the stream running, propped against the centerpiece. He provided running commentary on everything. The food. Jenna's actually a decent cook. Who knew? Our apartment. Very suburban, very safe. Definitely not my vibe. And our wedding plans. It's going to be super traditional, which is so not me. But hey, it's her day, right? Every few minutes, he'd read comments aloud and respond, turning what should have been family conversation into a performance. Mom and Dad seemed delighted by the attention, laughing at his jokes and playing up their reactions for the camera. I felt like a prop in my own home. Finally, as I served dessert, I couldn't take it anymore. "Simon, can you please turn that off? I want to talk to everyone about something important." "Oh, this sounds serious," Simon said to the camera. "Family drama alert." "Should I keep streaming, guys?" "No," I said firmly. "Turn it off, please." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then he shrugged and tapped his phone. "All right, family meeting time. I'll catch you guys later with some epic content. I've got some ideas brewing for my sister's wedding that are going to be absolutely insane. Peace out." The silence that followed felt strange after hours of his constant chatter. "What did you want to talk about, sweetheart?" Mom asked, though she seemed distracted, probably already thinking about what she'd seen in his comments. I took a deep breath. "It's about the wedding. Simon, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really listen to me, okay?" "Sure, what's up?" He was already fidgeting, probably itching to turn his phone back on. "I need you to promise me that you won't do any pranks or stunts at my wedding. No streaming, no filming for content, no surprises. Just be my brother for one day, please." Simon's face went through several expressions: confusion, amusement, and then something that might have been hurt. "Jenna, come on. You know I'm not going to ruin your wedding." "I know you don't mean to ruin things. I said carefully, but your pranks have gotten pretty intense lately, and this day is really important to Jake and me. I just want it to be perfect. So you think I'm going to mess it up?" "I think you're going to want to entertain your followers, and I'm asking you to put that aside for one day. Just one day, Simon. Can you give me that as a wedding gift? Dad cleared his throat. Sweetheart, don't you think you're being a little harsh? Simon's never done anything malicious. I stared at him. Dad, he's been sued 3 times this year. Those were misunderstandings, Mom interjected quickly. And anyway, those were strangers. This is family. That's exactly my point, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. It being family makes it more important, not less. Simon leaned back in his chair, studying me. You really don't trust me, do you? The question hung in the air like smoke. The honest answer was no, I didn't trust him. Not with anything that mattered to me. But saying that would start a fight that would last for months, and I was tired of fighting. I trust that you love me, I said finally. I just don't trust your judgment when it comes to content creation. Those are 2 different things. Wow. Simon shook his head. That's pretty harsh, Jen. Jake, who had been quiet through most of this exchange, finally spoke up. Look, Simon, it's not personal. It's just that weddings are stressful enough without worrying about variables. Variables, Simon repeated, and I could hear the edge in his voice. That's what I am to you guys? A variable. That's not what he meant, I said quickly. No, I think it's exactly what he meant. Simon stood up abruptly. You guys have already decided I'm going to screw up your perfect little wedding, so why don't you just uninvite me? Problem solved. Simon, sit down, Mom said sharply. Jenna, apologize to your brother. For what? I asked, incredulous. For implying he can't be trusted at his own sister's wedding. I looked around the table, at my mother's disapproving frown, my father's uncomfortable expression, Simon's hurt anger, and Jake's carefully neutral face. This wasn't how I'd wanted this conversation to go. I'm not implying anything, I said quietly. I'm directly asking for one favor on the most important day of my life. That's all. Simon studied me for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. The hurt was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Maybe determination, maybe defiance. Fine, he said finally. I won't do any pranks at your wedding, but I do have a surprise planned for you, and it's going to be amazing. Don't worry about it, okay? Trust me. Those last 2 words sent a chill down my spine that I couldn't explain. What kind of surprise? I asked. Simon's grin returned, bright and sharp as a knife. If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? Just trust me, Jen. When have I ever let you down? I could have answered that question with a list going back 23 years, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled weakly and said, Okay, thank you. But as my family left that night, Simon's words echoed in my head, trust me. And for the first time in my life, I realized that those might be the 2 most terrifying words my brother could say to me. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and perfect, like something out of a fairy tale. I woke up in the bridal suite at the Grandview Hotel, surrounded by my bridesmaids, my college roommate Sarah, my cousin Emma, and Jake's sister-in-law Lisa. The room smelled like coffee and hairspray and the gardenias from my bouquet, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly calm. Simon had been on his best behavior for 3 weeks. He'd attended the rehearsal dinner without his phone out once, had been charming and funny during the family photos, and had even helped Jake's uncle carry equipment without being asked. When I'd thanked him for keeping his promise, he just smiled and said, "Told you to trust me, didn't I?" Maybe I had been wrong about him. Maybe the wedding had given him perspective on what really mattered. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of and more. The church looked like something from a magazine, with white roses and baby's breath adorning every pew. Jake's eyes were bright with unshed tears as I walked down the aisle on Dad's arm. And when I reached the altar, he whispered, "You're so beautiful," just loud enough for me to hear. Simon stood with the other groomsmen, looking handsome in his black tux and actually paying attention to the service instead of fidgeting or making faces. During the ring exchange, he caught my eye and gave me a genuine smile, not his camera-ready grin, but the soft expression I remembered from childhood, from before everything became content. "Do you, Jenna Marie Smith, take Jacob Andrew Dawson to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. When Pastor Williams announced us as husband and wife, and Jake kissed me with such joy that I could taste his laughter, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. As we walked back down the aisle together, I spotted my family in the front row. Mom dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, Dad beaming with pride, and Simon actually looking emotional instead of calculating how many views this would get. The receiving line went smoothly, with guests offering congratulations and best wishes. Simon was charming without being over the top, making small talk with Jake's relatives and actually listening to their responses. When Mrs. Patterson, Jake's elderly aunt, told him how proud he must be of his sister, he said, "She's always been the best of us," and I felt my heart squeeze with love for my complicated brother. The photographer captured everything. Jake spinning me around on the church steps, our families mingling and laughing, Simon helping my grandmother down the stairs with genuine care. Looking at those photos now, you'd never guess what was coming. We had an hour break between the ceremony and the reception while the venue was being set up for the cocktail hour. I changed from my ceremony dress into my reception gown, a flowing, off-the-shoulder design that made me feel like a princess. Jake had switched to a lighter gray suit that complemented my dress perfectly. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Dawson?" he asked, pulling me close in the bridal suite. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. Everything's been perfect. "Even Simon?" he asked. I laughed. "Especially Simon. I think I might have misjudged him. He seems to really get how important today is." "I'm glad," Jake said, kissing the top of my head. I know how much it means to you to have your whole family here and happy." "It does," I admitted. "I know he drives me crazy, but he's still my brother, you know? I want him to be part of this." Jake pulled back to look at me, his expression soft. "That's one of the things I love most about you. You never give up on people, even when they don't deserve it." "He deserves it," I said. "He's family." Looking back, I think that was the last purely happy moment I had that day. Standing in my beautiful dress, in my husband's arms, believing that everything was going to be perfect because love could conquer all our family's dysfunction. I was so naive. At 5 o'clock, we made our grand entrance into the reception area. The hotel's poolside terrace had been transformed into something magical. String lights overhead, round tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white hydrangeas and greenery. The pool itself was decorated with floating candles and rose petals, creating a romantic backdrop for the cocktail hour. Our families and friends cheered as we walked in, and Jake spun me around again, making my dress flare out around me. I felt like I was living inside a dream. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "for the first time anywhere, Mr. and Mrs. Jake Dawson." The applause was thunderous. I looked around at all the smiling faces. My college friends, Jake's work colleagues, both our extended families, Simon standing with the other groomsmen, and actually clapping instead of filming. This was it. This was my perfect day. I should have known it couldn't last. The cocktail hour was magical. Jake and I moved through our guests like we were floating, accepting congratulations and soaking in the love that surrounded us. The evening air was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that made the string lights dance overhead. I had never felt more beautiful or more loved. For the first hour, Simon was the perfect brother. He mingled with guests, posed for photos when asked, and even gave a sweet impromptu toast when someone requested one. "To my sister Jenna," he'd said, raising his champagne glass, "who taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures, it's about showing up every day." And to Jake, who somehow convinced her to take a chance on our crazy family. Everyone had laughed, and I'd felt tears prick my eyes. This was the Simon I remembered from childhood. My big brother who used to protect me from bullies and help me with my homework before the cameras and the followers and the constant need for attention took over his life. I should have known the performance wouldn't last. It started small. I noticed Simon pull out his phone during a conversation with Jake's cousin. Then he began positioning himself in the background of other people's photos, making exaggerated faces. When I caught his eye and shook my head, he just grinned and put the phone away. But 10 minutes later, he was back at it. "Hey, streamers!" I heard him say, and my heart dropped. "Simon here, coming to you live from my sister's wedding reception. Look at this setup. They really went all out." He was live streaming. After everything we'd talked about, after his promise, he was treating my wedding reception like content for his followers. I started moving toward him, Jake close behind me, but Simon was already in full performance mode. He was walking around the reception area, providing commentary like he was giving a tour. So we're at this super fancy hotel, right? And they've got the pool all decorated with candles and flowers. Very Pinterest, very aesthetic. My sister definitely has expensive taste. He laughed that artificial streamer laugh I'd grown to hate. But wait until you see what I've got planned. This is going to be epic. Simon, I called, trying to keep my voice calm. Several guests were starting to stare. Oh, there's the bride herself! Everyone say hi to my sister Jenna! He swung the camera toward me, and I instinctively put my hand up to block my face. The last thing I wanted was to be broadcast to his thousands of followers without my consent. Simon, please turn that off, I said, walking up to him. This isn't the time. Come on, don't be camera shy. The streamers love you already. Look at these comments. He held up his phone, showing me the stream of messages from his viewers. They're saying you look beautiful, which you do, by the way. I don't care what they're saying, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You promised me no streaming. I promised no pranks, Simon corrected, his smile never wavering. This isn't a prank. This is just sharing a special moment with my community. They're part of my family, too. They're strangers on the internet, I snapped. Behind him, I could see our guests starting to gather, sensing drama. Jake's parents looked confused and concerned. My parents were approaching with disapproving frowns, but I couldn't tell if they were disapproving of Simon's behavior or my reaction to it. Ooh, family drama, Simon announced to his phone. This is getting spicy, guys. Simon, Jake said, stepping up beside me, his voice carrying a warning. Turn it off. Now. Whoa, whoa. Simon held up his free hand in mock surrender. No need to get aggressive, brother-in-law. I'm just having fun. This isn't fun, I said, and I could feel tears starting to build behind my eyes. This is my wedding day, and you're treating it like a show. Because it is a show. Simon gestured around at the decorated terrace, the elegant guests, the perfect setup. Look at all this. It's like something out of a movie. My followers are never going to see anything this fancy. I'm giving them a gift. You're giving them a gift? I repeated, incredulous. This is supposed to be about Jake and me, not your audience. It can be about both. Simon's voice was getting louder, more defensive. God, Jenna, when did you become so selfish? The word hit me like a slap. Around us, the reception had gone almost quiet, our guests pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. Selfish? I repeated. For wanting my own wedding to be private? For wanting to control every single thing? Simon shot back. This is supposed to be a celebration, but you're acting like it's some kind of sacred ritual that no one's allowed to enjoy. I stared at him, this person who shared my DNA but felt like a complete stranger. The hurt in my chest was so sharp I could barely breathe. I just wanted one day, I whispered. Just one day where it wasn't all about you and your followers. Simon's expression changed then, hardening into something cold and mean. Gone was any trace of the protective older brother I'd once idolized. You know what, Jenna? You're right. This should be about you. Let me give you exactly what you want. He turned back to his phone, his streamer smile returning full force. All right, guys, my sister thinks I should make this day all about her, so let's give the bride exactly what she wants. A moment she'll never forget. That's when I realized what was about to happen. I saw him reach for the glass of red wine on the nearby cocktail table, saw the calculated gleam in his eyes, saw him position himself between me and the pool. Simon, don't, I started to say, but he was already moving, already throwing the wine at me with theatrical flair, already shouting, "Surprise! Now the bride's dress matches the roses!" The red wine hit me square in the chest, soaking through the delicate fabric of my dress, staining it dark and permanent. Gasps and screams erupted from our guests. I stumbled backward in shock, my feet tangling in my long skirt, my heel catching on something. A pool light, maybe, or a decoration. I felt myself falling, felt the world tilt sideways. My head struck the stone edge of the pool with a sickening crack that seemed to echo through my skull. Pain exploded through my brain like lightning, and then I was in the water, the decorated pool that had looked so beautiful just moments before. The last thing I remember clearly was the taste of chlorine and blood, the sound of people screaming my name, and the surreal sight of Simon still holding his phone, still filming, while his comments exploded with messages calling him a monster. Then everything went dark. But I'm told that Jake dove in immediately, his suit and all, to pull me from the water. I'm told that someone called 911, that my parents ran to the pool's edge, that guests scattered in panic and confusion. And I'm told that through it all, Simon kept streaming, kept filming my unconscious body being pulled from the pool, kept capturing every moment of the chaos he'd created. It wasn't until Jake's brother Torrance physically grabbed the phone from Simon's hands and ended the stream that he finally stopped recording the worst moment of my life. By then, it was too late. The damage was done. The video was already viral. And I was already on my way to the hospital, blood still seeping from the crack in my skull, my perfect wedding day transformed into a nightmare that thousands of strangers had watched unfold in real time. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital had seen its share of trauma, but the sight of a bride being rushed in on a stretcher, her white dress stained with blood and pool water, drew stares from even the most seasoned staff. Jake ran alongside the gurney, still dripping wet, his gray suit plastered to his body. "Sir, you need to let us work," a nurse said gently, trying to guide him away as they wheeled Jenna into a trauma bay for immediate assessment before emergency surgery. "That's my wife," Jake said, his voice breaking on the word. "We just got married 3 hours ago." The nurse's expression softened with sympathy, but she was firm. "She needs emergency surgery for the head injury. We'll take good care of her, I promise. Let us do our job." Jake found himself in the waiting room, suddenly aware that he was leaving puddles on the linoleum floor. Other wedding guests began arriving in clusters. His parents, his brother Torrance, some of Jenna's college friends. They all looked shell-shocked, still dressed in their wedding finery, but with expressions of disbelief and horror. Damien and Claudia Smith arrived 20 minutes later, but not alone. Simon trailed behind them, no longer streaming but still clutching his phone like a lifeline. "How is she?" Claudia asked, rushing to Jake. "I don't know yet," Jake replied tightly. "She's still in surgery." "This is all just a terrible accident," Damien said, shaking his head. "Simon didn't mean for this to happen." Jake stared at him. "Are you serious right now?" "Of course he's serious," Claudia snapped. "Simon would never intentionally hurt his sister. He loves her. He threw wine at her and live-streamed it to thousands of people." Jake's voice was rising, drawing looks from other families in the waiting room. "It was supposed to be funny," Simon said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since arriving. "It was just supposed to be a harmless prank. She wasn't supposed to fall. You threw wine at a woman in high heels standing next to a swimming pool," Torrance said, speaking up for the first time. "What exactly did you think would happen?" Simon's jaw tightened. "I didn't think she'd overreact like that." "Overreact?" Jake repeated, incredulous. "Do you hear yourself? She is your daughter, for crying out loud. She could have died." "But she didn't," Damien interjected, "and getting hysterical isn't going to help anyone." Jake took a step toward his new father-in-law, and Torrance quickly moved between them. "Maybe we should all take a breath," Torrance suggested diplomatically. "Don't tell us to take a breath," Claudia said sharply. "Our son is devastated about what happened. This is hard on him, too." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Hard on him? He's not the one bleeding from a head injury." "You don't understand," Claudia continued. "Simon's career could be ruined by this. Do you know how many followers he's already lost? People are saying terrible things about him online." The waiting room went dead silent. Even other families stopped their own quiet conversations to stare at this woman who seemed more concerned about her son's social media metrics than her daughter's life-threatening injuries. "His career?" Jake repeated slowly. "His career?" "He didn't mean it," Damien said again. "Jenna knows how Simon is. She should have known he was just playing around." "So this is Jenna's fault?" Jake's voice was dangerously quiet now. "That's not what we're saying." Claudia backtracked quickly. "We're just saying that Simon never intended." "He intended to humiliate her on her wedding day," Jake cut her off. "He intended to throw wine at her while filming it for his audience. The only thing he didn't intend was getting caught looking like the selfish asshole he really is." "Hey!" Simon stood up abruptly. "You don't get to talk about me like that." "I'll talk about you however I want," Jake shot back. "You almost killed my wife." "It was an accident," Simon said, The wine wasn't an accident. The filming wasn't an accident. The only accident was that your little stunt had consequences for once in your privileged life. That's enough. Damien stepped between them. Simon made a mistake, but attacking him isn't going to help Jenna. Nothing I do is going to help Jenna right now, Jake said, his anger suddenly deflating into exhaustion. Because she's in there fighting for her life while you're all standing here making excuses for the person who put her there. A doctor in scrubs appeared at the waiting room entrance. Family of Jenna Dawson? Jake stepped forward immediately. That's me, her husband. The doctor's expression was professional but kind. She has a significant head injury, what we call a cranial contusion. There's swelling in her brain, and we need to monitor her very carefully. We've moved her to the ICU. Is she going to be okay? Jake's voice was barely a whisper. The next few days are critical, the doctor said honestly. Head injuries like this are unpredictable. We've induced a coma to reduce the swelling and give her brain time to heal. I know this is scary, but she's getting the best care possible. Can I see her? Jake asked. Yes, but only immediate family for now, and only briefly. She needs rest. As Jake followed the doctor toward the ICU, he heard Claudia behind him saying, "We should call that lawyer again, the one who helped Simon with the DUI, just in case." Jake turned around and gave them the middle finger. He stopped himself for saying anything anymore. He couldn't trust himself to remain civil if he had to look at Jenna's parents for one more second. The next day, 15 miles away back in his childhood bedroom, the full scope of Simon's digital disaster was becoming clear. The livestream had been automatically archived, and clips from it were spreading across every social media platform imaginable. Streamers react to worst wedding prank ever videos were already accumulating millions of views. TikTok users were stitching the moment of impact with crying emojis and angry commentary. Reddit threads with titles like "Entitled influencer nearly kills sister at wedding" were gaining thousands of upvotes by the hour. Simon sat on his unmade bed, scrolling through comment after comment. "Hope your sister is okay and that you go to jail for this." Imagine caring more about content than your own family. This is why I hate influencers, pure narcissism. Someone find out what hospital she's at so we can send flowers. Her brother sure won't. Career suicide in real time. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy? His subscriber count was dropping by the thousands every hour. Sponsors were pulling out and demanding refunds. Fellow streamers who had collaborated with him were posting statements distancing themselves from his actions. But the worst part, the part that made his stomach twist with something that might have been shame, were the comments from his longtime viewers, the ones who had supported him for years. "I've watched you since you had 10K subs, Simon. I defended you through all the controversies. But this is unforgivable. I'm done. You used to be fun. Now you're just cruel, unsubscribed. I hope your sister never speaks to you again. You don't deserve her." Simon threw his phone across the room, where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor. But the silence that followed was somehow worse than the constant ping of notifications. For the first time in his adult life, Simon Smith was truly alone with the consequences of his actions. And for the first time in years, no one was watching. The first thing I noticed was the beeping. Steady, rhythmic, persistent. It took me a long time to realize it was keeping time with my heartbeat. The second thing I noticed was that everything hurt. Not sharp pain, exactly, but a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to emanate from my skull and radiate through my entire body. Even my teeth hurt. I tried to open my eyes, but the light was too bright, too harsh. I managed to squint and saw white ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, the kind of institutional beige walls that could only mean one thing. Where am I? The words came out as barely more than a whisper, and even that small effort made my throat feel like I'd been swallowing glass. But someone heard me. There was movement, a chair scraping against linoleum, and then Jake's face appeared in my limited field of vision. He looked terrible, unshaven, hair unwashed, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. He was still wearing his wedding suit, though it was wrinkled and stained now. "Jenna?" His voice cracked on my name. "Oh God, Jenna! You're awake." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain exploded through my head like fireworks. Jake's hands were there instantly, gentle but firm, keeping me still. "Don't move, babe. Just lie still." "What happened?" I asked, though even as the words left my mouth, fragments of memory were starting to return. The reception. Simon with his phone, the wine, the falling. "You hit your head," Jake said simply. "You've been unconscious for 6 days." 6 days. I'd lost 6 days of my life. "The wedding," I whispered, and then it all came flooding back. The beautiful ceremony, the perfect reception, Simon's promise, his betrayal, the wine hitting my dress, the sensation of falling backward, the crack of my skull against stone. I started to cry, which only made the pain in my head worse. Each sob sent shockwaves through my skull, but I couldn't stop. My wedding day, the day I'd planned for so long, dreamed about since I was a little girl, was ruined. Not just ruined, turned into a viral spectacle for thousands of strangers to gawk at. "I'm so sorry," Jake whispered, leaning down to press his forehead gently against mine. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." "Is he still filming it?" I asked through my tears, and Jake's expression darkened. "No, Torrance took his phone away. But Jenna..." He hesitated, clearly not wanting to tell me something. "The video went viral. I'm sorry. I tried to get it taken down, but it spread too fast." So not only had Simon ruined my wedding day, but he'd made sure the whole world could watch my humiliation and injury on repeat. The thought made me feel sick. "How bad?" I asked. "Bad," Jake admitted. "But there's been a lot of backlash against Simon, too. He's lost most of his followers. His sponsors dropped him. People are calling him out everywhere." I should have felt some satisfaction in that, but I was too tired, too hurt, too overwhelmed. The pain medication they had me on was making everything feel distant and fuzzy, but not distant enough to escape the emotional devastation. "Can I go back to sleep?" I whispered. "Okay," Jake said softly. "I'll be right here when you wake up." As consciousness faded again, I heard him whisper, "I love you, Mrs. Dawson. We're going to get through this." Even in my medicated haze, that made me smile just a little. Mrs. Dawson. Despite everything, I was still married to the most wonderful man in the world. I woke up to knocking on my hospital room door. The pain in my head had subsided to a dull throb, and I could see more clearly now, though everything still felt slightly unreal, like I was viewing the world through thick glass. Jake wasn't in the chair beside my bed, which was unusual. He'd barely left my side since I'd woken up the day before. Instead, I saw Torrance rising from the visitor's chair, closing what looked like a legal pad. "Hey there," he said gently. His usual sharp demeanor softened with concern. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I croaked. My throat was still raw, probably from the breathing tube they'd had down it while I was unconscious. "That's actually not too far from the truth," Torrance said grimly. "Do you remember what happened?" "Most of it," I said, though even thinking about it made my chest tight with anxiety. "Where's Jake?" "He went to get coffee. He's been here almost constantly. I finally convinced him to shower and eat something yesterday, but he was back within 2 hours. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, followed by voices in the hallway. "She's awake, right?" "The nurse said she was awake," I heard my mother saying. "Remember, we need to get her to forgive Simon publicly," my father's voice replied. "For the family's sake." "And for Simon's career," Mom added. "If she forgives him on camera, maybe people will move on." My stomach dropped. They were talking about me like I was a PR problem to be managed, not their daughter recovering from a traumatic brain injury. The door opened without permission, and my parents walked in, followed by Simon. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled hoodie. But what made my blood run cold was the phone in his hand, already recording. "Jenna!" Mom rushed to my bedside, her voice artificially bright. "Sweetheart, look who came to see you." Simon hung back near the door, holding his phone at an angle that captured both of us. I could see the red recording light, the viewer count already climbing. "What's going on?" I asked weakly, looking between my parents and my brother. "Simon has something he wants to say to you," Dad said, his voice carrying that tone parents use when they're directing a school play. Simon stepped closer to my bed, and I could see him checking his phone screen to make sure he was in frame. "Hey, Jenna," he said, his voice softer than usual, but somehow still performative. "I wanted to come see you and apologize for what happened at your wedding." I stared at him, then at his phone, then at my parents who were watching him with encouraging expressions. "Are you filming this?" I asked. I thought people should see that we're okay, that we're still family," Simon said. "My followers have been really worried about you." The comments on his live stream were moving too fast to read clearly, but I caught glimpses. "She looks rough. Ask if she's mad. This is so awkward." "I'm really sorry about what happened," Simon continued, reading from what looked like notes on his phone. "It was supposed to be a fun surprise, just a little wine toss like you see in movies. I never meant for you to get hurt. I've been devastated thinking about it." There was something so hollow about his words, so calculated. This wasn't an apology. It was damage control. "I know this has been hard on both of us," he went on, glancing at his viewer count, "but I was hoping we could put this behind us, for family." I looked at my parents, who were nodding encouragingly, and then at Torrance, who was watching the whole scene with barely contained disgust. Despite everything, despite the calculated nature of this visit, I found myself wanting to believe that somewhere inside this performance was my real brother. The one who used to read me bedtime stories when I had nightmares, who taught me to ride a bike, who once punched Tommy Morrison for pulling my pigtails in 3rd grade. "Simon," I said quietly, "if you turn off the camera, maybe we can talk." "This is talking," Simon replied quickly. "I just want everyone to see that we're working through this together. That's what family does, right?" "Family doesn't film each other without permission in hospital rooms," Torrance said sharply. Simon's expression hardened. "Nobody asked you, man. This is a family matter." "Turn off the camera, Simon," I said, my voice getting stronger. "Please, if you really want to apologize, do it without an audience. The audience is part of who I am, Jenna. They're my community, so they care about us." I looked at his phone screen, but my vision was still blurry from the head injury, and I couldn't make out the individual comments clearly. But I could see there were a lot of them, scrolling by rapidly. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "that maybe I could forgive you. Maybe we could find a way to move past this. But not like this. Not with cameras and comments and strangers weighing in on our family business." "But that's how I communicate with people," Simon said, frustration creeping into his voice. "This is my job, Jenna. You can't ask me to just turn off who I am. I'm asking you to be my brother instead of a content creator for 5 minutes." I said, "I can be both." "No," I said sadly, "you can't. You've proven that." Simon's jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of the entitled anger I knew so well. "Look, I came here to apologize, but honestly, maybe you should take some responsibility too." The room went dead quiet except for the beeping of my heart monitor, which was picking up speed. "Excuse me?" I said. You've always been kind of clumsy, Jenna. Remember when we were kids and you fell off your bike like every week? And you were wearing those ridiculous heels at the wedding?" "Simon," Torrance warned, standing up from his chair. "And you totally overreacted to a little wine. Like, it was just wine. People get wine spilled on them at parties all the time, and they don't, fall into pools and crack their heads open." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, even in this manufactured apology, he was blaming me for my own injuries. "You threw wine at me," I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You humiliated me on my wedding day in front of hundreds of people and thousands of strangers online, and you're saying it's my fault because I'm clumsy? I'm just saying, maybe if you weren't so dramatic about everything." "That's enough," Torrance interrupted, but Simon wasn't finished. "She's always been like this," Simon said, turning to address his phone camera directly. "Always making everything about her, always playing the victim. I try to include her in my content, try to share a special moment with my community, and she acts like I committed some kind of crime." "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jenna, honey," Mom interjected quickly, "Simon didn't mean that. He's just upset." "He meant every word," I said, looking at my brother who was still filming, still performing for his audience. "You know what your problem is, Jenna?" Simon continued, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous that I have something that matters, that I've built something real. And now you want to tear it down because you can't stand that your big brother is more successful than you." The heart monitor was beeping faster now, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't my brother apologizing, this was him attacking me on camera for his followers' entertainment. "Simon, that's enough." Dad finally spoke up, but his voice lacked any real authority. "No, it's not enough," Simon shot back. "I came here to make peace, and she's acting like I'm some kind of monster. All I did was throw a little wine. It was supposed to be funny." "Hey, back off." Torrance said to Simon, who had moved closer to my bed while ranting, "You're upsetting her." "I'm not talking to you," Simon snapped, turning his phone to capture Torrance in the frame. "You're not even family, dude. This doesn't concern you." "Simon, stop filming," Dad said weakly. "No, seriously," Simon continued, his streamer persona in full force now. "Who is this guy to interfere in our family business? Mom, Dad, tell him to get out. This is a private family conversation." My parents looked uncomfortable but nodded. Despite everything Simon had just said to me, despite the way he'd attacked me on camera, they were still taking his side. "Maybe you should give us some privacy," Mom said to Torrance, her voice cold. I couldn't believe it. Even after watching Simon blame me for my own injuries, even after seeing him turn what should have been an apology into content for his followers, they were still protecting him. "You're taking his side," I said, staring at my parents in disbelief. "After everything he just said to me, you're taking his side." "We're not taking anyone's side," Dad said quickly. "We just think family business should stay in the family." "He's broadcasting our family business to thousands of strangers," I pointed out. "That's different," Mom said. "That's just how Simon communicates." Torrance looked at me, and I could see the anger in his eyes, not at me, but at my family's complete dysfunction. "Before I go," Torrance said calmly, pulling out his wallet, "I should introduce myself properly." He extracted a business card and handed it to my father. "I'm Torrance Dawson, Esquire. I'm a criminal attorney, and as of this moment, I'm representing Mrs. Dawson in the assault charges we'll be filing against Simon." The color drained from my parents' faces, but Simon just laughed. "Assault? Dude, it was a prank." "Throwing liquid at someone without their consent is assault," Torrance replied matter-of-factly. "Recording it and broadcasting it to thousands of people makes it worse. And what you just did, filming a patient in a hospital room without permission while trying to coerce her into making statements, that's harassment and unlawful surveillance." "This is ridiculous," Simon said, but he was still filming. "I suggest you leave now," Torrance continued, "and if you want to communicate with my client about this matter, you can go through me." What we didn't notice is Jake saw and heard everything. He was at the door the whole time. He saw everything, me upset and agitated in bed, Simon with his phone still recording, my parents looking guilty, Torrance in full lawyer mode. "The audacity of you people still think that your asshole of a son is the fucking victim here," Jake yelled. "Language, Jake," Mom scolded automatically, but her voice was shaky. "Language?" Jake repeated incredulously. "Your son just spent the last 10 minutes attacking my wife on camera while she's recovering from a traumatic brain injury, and you're worried about language?" "He was trying to apologize," Dad said weakly. "He called her clumsy and dramatic and said she was jealous of his success." Jake shot back, his voice rising. "That's not an apology, that's an attack." Simon raised his phone higher, still recording. "This is actually great content. The drama is real." "Turn that fucking thing off right now," Jake snarled, taking a step toward Simon. "Jake, don't," I said quickly, though my voice was weak. The confrontation was exhausting me, and my head was pounding, but Jake wasn't backing down. "You have exactly 10 seconds to get out of my wife's room before I call security and have you arrested for trespassing." "You can't arrest me for visiting my sister." "I can have you arrested for filming someone without consent, for harassment, and for violating hospital policy," Jake replied. "Torrance, is that accurate?" "Completely accurate," Torrance confirmed. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. A hospital security guard peered in. "Is everything all right in here? We've had complaints about noise from other patients." Jake immediately stepped toward the guard. "Actually, we need to call the police. This man," he pointed at Simon, "has been filming my wife without her consent while she's a patient here, harassing her and potentially tampering with a witness in an upcoming criminal case." "That's not—" Simon started, but the security guard was already reaching for his radio. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn off that recording device and step outside, the guard said to Simon. This is bullshit, Simon muttered, but he finally stopped recording and shoved his phone in his pocket. They were still bickering back and forth when 2 police officers arrived. While they spoke with Jake and Torrance in my room, my parents arguing in hushed, angry voices. This is all your fault, Mom hissed at me. You're destroying this family over a simple accident. He attacked me on camera, I said weakly. He was defending himself, Dad replied. You were being unreasonable, refusing to accept his apology. That wasn't an apology, I replied. It would have been if you'd given him a chance, Mom snapped. But no, you had to be dramatic, had to play the victim, had to turn everyone against your own brother. I stared at them, these people who had raised me, and realized that I was completely alone. Even after everything they just witnessed, they couldn't see past their golden child to acknowledge what he'd done to me. The police officers came in with Jake and Torrance. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, approached my bed. Mrs. Dawson? I'm Officer Charles. I understand there was an incident here today involving filming without consent and possible witness intimidation. Would you like to press charges? I looked at my parents, who were staring at me with a mixture of panic and anger. I looked at Simon, who was trying to look contrite now that the police were involved. Then I looked at Jake and Torrance, the family I had chosen, the people who actually cared about my well-being. Yes, I said quietly. I want to press charges. I watched from my hospital bed as Officer Charles placed handcuffs on Simon right there in my room. The reality of the situation seemed to hit him all at once. This wasn't content. This wasn't a prank. This was real legal trouble that Daddy's checkbook might not be able to fix. Wait, what? This is insane, Simon protested as Officer Paul read him his rights. I didn't do anything illegal. You have the right to remain silent, Officer Charles said, calmly. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. My parents stood frozen in shock, watching their golden child being arrested in a hospital room. We'll call the lawyer, Dad said quickly to Simon. Don't say anything. This is all your fault, Mom hissed at me as they led Simon away. You're destroying this family. But I felt nothing but relief as I watched Simon leave my hospital room in handcuffs. For the first time in my life, there were real consequences for his actions. The news of Simon's arrest spread like wildfire across social media. Shaq Simon Says Jail trended on Twitter, and TikTok was flooded with reaction videos supporting me and condemning Simon's behavior. The story resonated because of my parents' continued defense of Simon even after his arrest, which struck a nerve with viewers who had experienced similar family dysfunction. Over the following weeks, I slowly recovered from my brain injury while Torrance handled the legal proceedings. My parents gave a disastrous TV interview where my mother suggested my brain injury had affected my judgment and that I was being manipulated. The interview backfired spectacularly, generating even more public outrage and support for me. Simon's legal team pushed for a plea deal as the evidence was overwhelming. They offered 6 months in county jail, probation, full restitution for my medical bills, a restraining order, and a public apology. I accepted, and Jake respected my decision. At the sentencing hearing, I gave a victim impact statement. I told the court exactly what Simon had done to me, but more importantly, I turned to my parents in the gallery and formally cut all ties with them. I announced that I would no longer accept any contact from my biological family, since they had chosen to protect my attacker instead of supporting me. The courtroom was silent except for my mother's sharp gasp. Months later, Simon posted his public apology video. He looked genuinely humbled and took full responsibility. He mentioned that a cellmate, a kid younger than him in jail for stealing food for his family, made him understand what he really was. I am the worst person he has ever met. I am that someone who hurt the people who loved me for money and attention. I am that person who is ready to hurt them just for views. Watching the video, I found myself questioning how I felt. Was I happy with his apology? Was I still angry? The answer surprised me. No, I wasn't angry anymore. Somewhere along the way, I had already let go of the pain. The apology was nice to hear, but I didn't need it to heal. I had already chosen my peace over their chaos. 6 months later, Jake and I had settled into our new normal. I still had occasional headaches from the brain injury, but I'd learned to manage them. Simon kept his word about the restraining order and disappeared from social media. My parents never reached out directly, though I heard they still believed I was being vindictive. The last I heard from them was a Christmas card with no return address. "We love you and hope you'll come home when you're ready to forgive." I tucked it away in my drawer without reading the rest. Maybe someday I would forgive them, not for their sake, but for mine. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it certainly didn't mean letting them back into my life. Home wasn't a place you returned to. It was something you built with people who chose to love you without conditions. And Jake and I were building a beautiful home together.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.